Welcome back. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for a special National Executive Committee meeting, this of course, of the ANC's top members. The meeting, which is scheduled for tomorrow, is more likely to focus on Ramaphosa's new cabinet for his upcoming presidential term. To discuss this further and perhaps to also take a look at what the ANC president has been telling the voters a short while ago, I'm joined now in studio by Professor Susan Booysen. Prof is the Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Good to have you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, let's start with the thank you rally at Letuli House. If you were sitting and watching the ANC president as a disgruntled member of the ANC, perhaps who had abstained in the previous elections, would you be convinced with what he had to say?
I would probably say good beginning, good start. Many of the right words, pretty close to all of the right words. But let's say how action pans out. Let's see who you appoint into your cabinet, who goes into the top positions in government, and then let's wait for evidence that things are going right and going better this time around.
Emphasizing, of course, Prof, that the ANC has learned its lessons from this particular elections, and I think most importantly conceding that this was the most difficult campaign. Gauteng was their biggest challenge as well.
Yes, indeed. This was a big eye-opener for the ANC. I think it was a reminder that electoral mandates are not forever, that parties can actually be recalled. I recall once one ANC intellectual told me in explaining the decreases in ANC support in previous elections, he said, yes, a decline of the ANC and eventually possibly leading to an electoral loss is a bit like a wave rolling out to the beach. You know it's going to get to the beach, but you do not know how long it's going to take. And of course we know that it contradicts with what some ANC people have been saying, really, that the ANC will be governing forever, but 7.5 percentage points from an outright majority is not a guarantee of governing forever. And this is really a second chance mandate for the ANC. It's a warning that you get it right this time around, or the next time around, perhaps not such good news.
And part of what he was emphasizing in his messages, we've gone to the people down on the ground during our door-to-door campaigns. We've heard their cries. We've heard what they want. We are going to go back and make sure that what they wanted is delivered to them. And you and I were having this discussion of air to say the implementation part thereof may be a challenge. He may want to do good from the top position, but when it infiltrates to the lower leaders, it may be a challenge.
Exactly. Many things can go wrong between a statement at a thank you rally and a good policy and what materializes on the ground, how well it's implemented, how well the leaders are guided, the leaders, political and bureaucrats, are actually guiding that mandate. So many things can go wrong. And I think the voters have been very patient with the ANC and in a way believing or having patience with the leaders when they say, we heard you this time around, we didn't know before. All the evidence is there that the leaders did actually know that before. But leaders are prepared to give second chances and third chances and maybe a sixth chance as well this time around to the sixth elections.
Maybe indeed. So he says this is a new era, of course, but he also spoke about ill discipline without the organization itself, saying that now leaders within the organization should refrain from being engaged in public spats, for example, in hanging their dirty linen in public, and they should speak in one voice. So one can say this surely points to the divisions that we still see within the ruling party.
Yes. We know those divisions are not going away. Just in the last week, we had a spat between Fikile Mbalula was defending Ramaphosa and the ANC SG Esmerashule. And on the interpretation of this mandate of the ANC, to what extent ANC has to thank Cyril Ramaphosa, whether people really endorse the ANC as such. And yes, it was probably with reference to that the President made these statements. It is going to be very difficult going forward, and the President would have to make sure that he keeps on interpreting the electoral mandate very, very tightly. I think given the basis on which ANC had campaigned, and clear-cut anti-corruption, no-nonsense government, responsible government, listening much better to people, to what leaders know are the needs on the ground. And I think this is a no-nonsense term, and the President would have to keep that interpretation very, very tight to ensure that there are no deviations, is no further corruption. There probably is such ingrained, institutionalized corruption that it's very difficult to get rid of. But all eyes are watching this government and every single political leader now. And there is much less chance to get away with it. If it happens, we almost guaranteed hear about it much faster than in the past.
Yeah, and of course he also made reference to the state capture inquiry, saying that they don't want anything to do with corruption within the party. As you say, they've got to end it. And importantly, he said people who do not want to serve the nation will have to step aside. This brings me to my next question. As I said on my introduction, that there are reports that, of course, we are likely to see a cabinet reshuffle, a major one. We've heard the ANC chairperson, Gwede Mantashe, during the week saying that they're going to make it a smaller cabinet with capable people.
Yes, and capable hopefully is very tightly interpreted too as not involved, not plunging into cookie jars and not getting the state reputation tainted through corruption, capture and all of those. And the cabinet reshuffle pending, and we know it is going to be smaller. We've heard several different reports that it's going to be lower than 30 or lower than 25, that there will be further consolidation of portfolios, very much a focus on the economic project. And I think when we see the cabinet being cleaned up, the only way in which Cyril Ramaphosa is going to get away with axing a few people without being accused of factionalism and being partisan to his own faction will actually be if he moves people from both his faction and from the other side around and make clear and bring in young bloods, new bloods. There are quite 4 or 5 names that are being mentioned in that already. David Masonda, Ronald Lamola, Stella Ndabeni Abrams, etc. A few of them will be new and slightly younger than the existing people. We also know that the Women's League are already punting for women being 50% of cabinet and of premiers and government in general. So there's really multiple constituencies pushing in on Cyril Ramaphosa and his top 6 at this stage: gender, age, clean, factions. So it's going to be a serious juggling act, but he only has this chance to get it right. It's really a litmus test for the Cyril Ramaphosa's new presidency, post-election presidency, for him to clean up and show that he's willing to take risks and run with new people with proven records who can drive a new visionary project for the ANC. That's the only chance to get ahead for the next election.
Yeah, I think there's an article that I read yesterday that talks about the likelihood of him bringing some opposition party leaders, the likes of Julius Malema and maybe Mmusi Maimane, into his cabinet just to make sure that it's balanced, so to say. So do you see that as a possibility? It hasn't happened in a while?
It is always a possibility. Yes, we haven't had that kind of government of national unity since the 1990s. In a way, it would make sense if you, given South Africa's deep economic crisis, unemployment crisis, that it's not just going to go away. In a way, it would make sense if everybody can unite in that. But with politics getting more competitive, opposition parties getting a bit closer to pushing the ANC out of outright majorities, it's a very competitive context. And the same kind of dynamics that we saw in the 1990s take the old National Party and then IFP out of government of national unity. Those kind of dynamics could very well still be there. And given South Africa's recent experiences with, not just good experiences with the coalition governments, maybe South Africans haven't got that kind of clean determination to go in and do things together anymore. Besides, opposition parties may want to say they first want to see the Cyril Ramaphosa as president clean up this government definitively before they want to get involved.
Yeah, probably. So if today's newspapers are anything to go by, we might even have a new deputy president.
Oh, that is such a million-dollar question, such a difficult issue, because we know David Mabuza, he has said in the past if there is definitive evidence against him, he's prepared to step aside. We know that kind of evidence is not yet there. And we also know that the ANC's Integrity Committee has apparently given a list of about 22 names of people who are tainted or implicated. And we know in terms of the ANC's NASREC policy decisions, if people are implicated, they are supposed to be stepping aside. And so it's going to be a contest there. Does he stay? Is he seen as tainted without the definitive clear-cut evidence being put on the table yet? Is it a time for a woman? Some of the speculation has gone. If so, which, where?
Exactly. I wanted to ask,
does
if that
the ANC,
happens, then who's next?
Yes.
Yeah.
And men or women, does the ANC really at this stage have a clear-cut new layer coming through who is dynamic, who can articulate the new ANC vision and is clean enough? But is there anybody inside of this? And this reinforces the message of the past week of Cyril Ramaphosa almost being the only game in town.
And we're also reading, Prof, that it looks like some pro-Zuma cabinet ministers are planning to resign before the reshuffle to sort of save their faces. So do you think that will happen? They would resign on their own before the cabinet can be reshuffled?
They will probably hear in the grapevine as to whether they are safe or not, and they probably have heard that kind of news already. But usually, members of parliament who are in cabinet, usually there's a bit of leeway, and the cabinet is reshuffled, and then have about a month or so. We've seen a few of those resignations as members of parliament quite a few weeks after people had actually been axed from cabinet. So there is always that bit of space, and I think they will first make absolutely sure that they're not going to be in cabinet anymore before they also resign from parliament. Their pensions are safe. They don't have to do it preemptively.
But then who's likely to stay and who should go?
There is a pretty long list of people who have been implicated in various places and on various types of issues, from gender harassment and down the list to severe corruption, and case of Patibile Dlamini really.
Is that even a possibility? That's the president of the Women's League.
That is she's in a serious position of power. She is not just the president of the Women's League. She is also on the ANC's National Working Committee in a pretty high position there. So the only way she could go is if she's offered something better, if there had been appeasement and negotiations behind the scenes. But in a way, she had almost also become one of those litmus tests of, is this persuasive, convincing new cabinet, or is it more of the same? So they would have had to be serious.
Now, I was looking at the ANC president whilst he was talking just a short while ago, whilst he was saying, down with corruption, and there was some ANC top 6 members who have been implicated, of course, in state capture, and they were there.
Yes, and they were probably cheering as well. I couldn't quite see their faces there. Yes, everybody in there who have also been implicated in the past always think that the public pretense is a very big part of it. If they appear not to be feeling guilty, they will not be seen as guilty, or could be even be inferred not to be guilty of anything. And people are really still going on the fact if they're not convicted, then nothing can be held against them. And that is probably one of the big issues that we're going to be panning out in the next 2 weeks.
Yes, indeed, of course. So the NEC meeting tomorrow, we're reading now that a report by the ANC's Integrity Committee, a recommendation of about what, 22
Yes.
compromised individuals in the list may also be discussed tomorrow?
Yes, we can imagine that that is going to be a heated discussion. The election they did come as an intervening factor, but I think the issues and sentiments pre-election are going to be struggling to go away in that NEC meeting. So it is going to depend so much on whether those NEC meeting members actually see this election mandate as a very conditional one, as one in which they have to show that they are not the same NEC with the same defenses and defense mechanisms as they were just before the election. They would have to show that, yes, this post-election 57.5% ANC can be a different and a new ANC. We do not yet know whether that message is really filtering through.
Yeah, we don't. But do you think the ANC SGA's Magashule is in hot water amid for suggesting that President Cyril Ramaphosa was not necessarily the central reason that the ANC secured victory?
Well, we have seen people really explain incredibly difficult things as being quoted out of context. So I'm waiting for the Ace Marshall, who was quoted out of context, explanation there. We've already seen even Fikile Mbalula came in and said in some statement today, or quoted in the newspapers today, that Ace Marshall probably meant that Ramaphosa was a factor, but there were many other important factors as well.
So
even Fikile Mbalula is explaining that away.
Yeah.
So that will probably be forgiven in the spirit of the election and having managed to still win the election.
Now, going into the provinces, of course, he went on to discuss what's going to happen, that members of parliament will be sworn in, and then the premiers will be appointed. When you take it to the provincial levels, let's take a look at what was known as Premier League, the provinces,
yes.
Free State, Northwest, Mpumalanga. Are we likely to see any major shake-ups there?
The President and the NEC and the top six, they're all going to be very, very careful, because in some places there are very fragile balances there. And they are going to see which three names. Each of the provincial executive committees of the ANC in 8 provinces where they got the majority, each of the species is going to put forward a list of 3 names. And they would have to be happy with any of the 3 names being taken. And that is where gender balance also comes in. We've seen in the past there have been gender balances maintained across the provincial premierships. And last term it was not great, and that is because they try to have a single center of power to get the ANC leader in the province also as the premier.
Because in some provinces, of course, we do have those 2 centers of power. The chairperson is not necessarily the premier of the province. So are we likely to see them do away with this kind of 2 centers of power?
They would have to strike a balance between getting united political operations there and bringing in gender balance across the provinces too. As you know, the provinces, women are not standing strong in leading the provinces. So if the ANC wants to get the gender balance right there, and the onus is in a way on them to do that, because the last time around it was not there. And then we saw in many cases speakers of the provincial parliaments, they turned out to be women, getting a balance in that way. So it is a serious juggling act that they have to weigh in there. It will depend how volatile, how sensitive those provinces are. It will depend on what kind of provincial support base the premier candidate can bring in for the ANC, because the ANC has declined across the provinces. And be having an anchored person who can also bring in serious numbers would also have to weigh if the ANC wants to resurrect itself or keep itself away from 50% level in next elections.
In the next election. And of course, some people are saying it would be interesting to see what happens in KwaZulu-Natal, whether Sihle Zigalala will be appointed the premier to try to sort of diffuse the tension in that province.
That is going to be such an important one, because the election also showed
the performance really,
something like minus 8 to 10, more than 8 percentage points decline for the ANC in that province. The the KwaZulu-Natal province is actually now the second weakest province of the ANC's after Gauteng. And so there are very, very serious issues to consider there, and unity, and possibly bringing in the lost ANC members in that province in future. That is also something that could be facilitated by a premiership.
It would be very interesting to see what happens there. But just a quick one in closing. If you were Cyril Ramaphosa, the ANC president, what would your point of departure be once you go into government again on the 25th?
It's easy for me to say, of course, so I can be brave, but I would like to think I would have been very brave. And so it is my mandate. That is what I pleaded in the campaign, even that I promised on that thank you stage this afternoon, to do things differently and to do things clean and to clean up and to listen to the people. And I would say, I don't care if this is my last term as president or if I get kicked out as president next week or next year, National General Council, whenever that threat may be.
There were those reports, really. Are we likely to see that happen, though?
It will be very, very difficult, especially now that he has won a very important and relatively clear-cut election mandate. Going in on these grounds, it has strengthened him, and I would say, be definitive, clean up. It would be difficult for him to get the whole of the top six along with him, but I think now is the moment where he can interpret, help them to understand the election mandate for what I believe it was.
All right, so Prof says it would be important for him to clean up. Thank you so much for coming through. There's really so much to get to. Time constraints, we'll leave it at this. Many thanks there, Prof.
You're welcome.
All right, well, there you have it. Professor Susan Booysen, she is the Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, reflecting on the performance of the ANC and most importantly the message from the ANC president to the ANC supporters, to the South Africans in general. So I suppose we'll wait and see what happens. We're taking a